On a crisp autumn morning, Marcus Kane navigated the gravel path that wound through the quiet rural cemetery nestled just outside the small town of Maplewood. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and fallen leaves, carrying a solemn stillness that seemed to wrap itself around the rows of weathered headstones. His footsteps were steady, measured, a habit ingrained over years of discipline, the kind that never quite left a man even after the uniform was hung up. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more compelling tales. And tell me, have you ever experienced a moment with your pet that changed everything? What was it like? I'd love to hear about it in the comments. His companion, Shadow, a large black Labrador with eyes as sharp as a hawk's, trotted close beside him. The dog's sleek coat glistened in the muted sunlight, filtering through a canopy of amber and gold. Shadow had been with Marcus through thick and thin, a loyal friend forged in the crucible of countless deployments and long, lonely nights. Today, however, Shadow's demeanor was far from ordinary. The dog's ears twitched, his nose lifted, and an unmistakable tension rippled through his muscular frame. Marcus stopped by the entrance, taking a moment to scan the rows of graves. The cemetery was simple, unadorned, an unspoken testament to the small-town community that took quiet pride in honoring its past. Yet, something about the place felt heavier today. Shadow's eyes locked onto a particular plot about halfway down the main path, his steps quickening with purpose. He veered sharply to the right, tugging at the leash with an urgency that caught Marcus off guard. "Easy, boy," Marcus murmured, adjusting his grip. But Shadow was resolute, pulling him forward with a determination that was unusual even for a dog well-trained in obedience. As they approached the grave, Marcus's heart tightened. The headstone was modest, worn by years of wind and rain, but the engraving was still legible. Lieutenant Jake Reynolds, United States Navy SEAL, 1985-2018. Marcus knelt slowly, his fingers tracing the cold, rough surface of the stone. Jake had been more than a comrade. He was a brother in arms, a man who had stood alongside Marcus through some of the darkest chapters of their lives. The memory of their last mission, a covert operation gone wrong, still haunted him, an open wound that never fully healed. Shadow sat rigidly by the grave, his gaze flickering between Marcus and the earth beneath the headstone. The dog's usually calm eyes now glistened with something deeper: distress, recognition, a silent plea. Marcus's brows furrowed. Dogs didn't behave like this without reason. Shadow was telling him something, though what exactly he couldn't yet grasp. The morning sun crept higher, casting long shadows over the cemetery as Marcus stood and took a deep breath. He let his mind drift briefly to the life he'd tried to build since retiring from the SEALs, quiet, uneventful, far from the chaos of combat zones. But moments like this reminded him that the past was never truly behind him. He looked down at Shadow, who now pawed gently at the ground near the base of the headstone. Marcus crouched and brushed aside a thin layer of leaves and dirt, revealing disturbed earth beneath. His military instincts snapped into focus. Something had been buried here recently, or someone had been digging. "All right, Shadow. What have you got for me?" Marcus whispered, the weight of unresolved questions pressing down on him. The dog barked softly, a low, urgent sound, and circled the grave with a restless energy. Marcus's fingers found a small, partially hidden object protruding from the soil, a weathered leather pouch tied with a faded cord. His pulse quickened as he carefully unearthed it and opened the flap. Inside lay a folded piece of paper, yellowed and creased with age. Unfolding the note, Marcus recognized the handwriting immediately, Jake's. The words were terse but clear. "Find the truth. Trust no one. A shiver ran down Marcus's spine. The message, cryptic yet charged with meaning, seemed to reach out from beyond the grave, pulling him back into a world he thought he'd left behind. Shadow nudged the pouch with his nose, his eyes locked on Marcus's face, as if urging him to take the first step. Marcus looked around the cemetery once more. The peaceful facade of Maplewood was a stark contrast to the turmoil unfolding in his heart. Here, in the stillness of forgotten lives, a new mission was beginning, one that would test his loyalty, his resolve, and the bond he shared with the dog at his side. As he pocketed the note and stood, Marcus cast a glance toward the town in the distance. The sun's rays now illuminated the rooftops and tree-lined streets, a picture of serene normalcy. But Marcus knew better. Beneath the quiet surface, secrets festered, and Shadow's insistence was a beacon in the darkness. With a firm grip on the leash, Marcus started back toward the cemetery gate, Shadow leading the way. The dog's alert posture and unwavering focus were a reminder that they were no longer just visitors paying respects. They were seekers of truth, drawn into a mystery that would unravel the fragile peace Marcus had fought so hard to find. As they reached the edge of the cemetery, Marcus's mind raced through memories of Jake, his laughter, his courage, the brotherhood they shared. The words on the note echoed in his thoughts. Trust no one. It was a warning, a call to vigilance. Marcus glanced down at Shadow, who wagged his tail slightly, eyes gleaming with anticipation. Together, man and dog stepped into the morning light, united in purpose. The road ahead was uncertain, but Marcus knew one thing for sure. He would follow Shadow's lead, no matter where it took them. The quiet town of Maplewood seemed oblivious to the storm about to unfold beneath its calm exterior. But Marcus Kane, a man shaped by loyalty and sacrifice, was ready to confront the shadows of the past. And with Shadow by his side, he felt the first stirrings of hope amid the lingering grief. The journey had begun. The morning sun climbed higher as Marcus Kane stepped off the cemetery path, the weight of the leather pouch in his pocket a constant reminder of the unfinished business waiting beneath the surface of Maplewood. Shadow padded silently beside him, alert and watchful, his dark eyes scanning every movement. The town, with its quiet streets and familiar faces, seemed untouched by the turmoil that churned inside Marcus, a man caught between two worlds. Back at his modest home on the outskirts of town, Marcus settled into the worn leather chair by the window, the view of rustling maple trees offering a fragile sense of peace. But the calm was deceptive. Years of service had carved deep lines into his face, each one a testament to battles fought both abroad and within. The transition to civilian life had been anything but smooth. Routine jobs felt meaningless, and the camaraderie he once cherished was now a distant memory. Here, in this quiet town, he struggled to find footing, haunted by memories that refused to fade. Shadow, sensing the shift in his owner's mood, rested his head on Marcus's knee, a steady presence in a world that often felt uncertain. Their bond was forged in the crucible of combat and reinforced in the silence of these small moments. Marcus reached down, scratching behind Shadow's ears, drawing strength from the dog's unwavering loyalty. The pouch in his pocket seemed to pulse with unspoken urgency. Jake Reynolds, Lieutenant, SEAL, brother, was a ghost from a past Marcus had tried to bury. But the message left behind, find the truth, trust no one, stirred something deeper. It wasn't just about uncovering what happened to Jake. It was about facing the demons that had taken root in Marcus's own heart. He rose from his chair and moved to the cluttered desk where a faded photograph lay among scattered papers. A picture of the SEAL team taken years ago, young men bound by duty and a shared oath. Jake's smile was the brightest among them, a beacon of hope that now felt painfully out of reach. Marcus's fingers brushed the photo before he gathered his gear: a worn jacket, a notebook, and a pen. He was no stranger to investigation, but this was personal. Maplewood, with its small-town charm and friendly faces, hid stories that needed telling. He had to navigate carefully, aware that trust was a fragile thing in these parts. Stepping outside, the crisp air filled his lungs. The streets were familiar, but tinged with a subtle tension Marcus hadn't noticed before. Neighbors exchanged polite nods, but their eyes carried unspoken secrets. The town was close-knit, yes, but that closeness sometimes bred silence over uncomfortable truths. Shadow led the way as Marcus made his way toward the local diner, a hub where information flowed more freely than official channels ever could. The bell chimed softly as they entered, drawing the attention of a few early patrons. The warm aroma of brewing coffee and freshly baked bread filled the room. At the counter, Marie, the diner's owner and a longtime resident, greeted Marcus with a cautious smile. "Morning, Marcus. Haven't seen you around much lately." "I'm trying to settle in," Marcus replied, his voice steady but guarded. "Thought I'd start asking some questions." Marie's eyes narrowed slightly, curiosity piqued, but tempered by years of knowing the limits of small-town gossip. "About what?" "About Jake Reynolds," Marcus said, watching her reaction closely. The mention of Jake's name caused a flicker of recognition and hesitation. Marie glanced toward a corner booth where a few older men sipped coffee, their conversation quiet but attentive. Jake was a good man, brave. Folks still remember him, even if some things weren't talked about much. Marcus nodded, understanding that the story was layered beneath layers of memory and perhaps fear. "Do you know why?" Marie sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. "There were rumors after that last mission of his. Not the kind you want to spread around. People were scared to say too much." Marcus's mind raced. The note, Shadow's behavior at the grave, it all pointed to a secret buried deep within the community. "I need to know everything. Who he was, what he did, and what might have gone wrong." Marie hesitated, then leaned in, lowering her voice. "Jake was more than a soldier. He was a man who cared. Some here saw him as trouble, though, especially after he started asking questions about the mission that took him away." Shadow growled softly, alert to the undercurrent in the room. Marcus placed a calming hand on the dog's head. "Questions about the mission?" Marie nodded grimly. "That's right. Jake didn't come back the same. He wanted answers that didn't sit well with some people. You'll find the town's friendly on the surface, but underneath, it's different." The conversation left Marcus with more questions than answers, but it was a start. He thanked Marie and stepped back into the sunlight, Shadow at his side, their resolve hardening. The town's charm was a mask, and Marcus was determined to peel it back. Later that afternoon, Marcus visited the local library, a small brick building filled with dusty archives and yellowed newspapers. He sifted through old articles and obituaries, piecing together Jake's story from fragmented reports and faded headlines. Each discovery added depth to the man he thought he knew. A loyal SEAL, a dedicated friend, and now a man who had stumbled onto something dangerous. The librarian, Mrs. Aldridge, watched him with a mixture of sympathy and quiet warning. Jake Reynolds was a hero, but heroes sometimes make enemies, she said softly. "If you're looking for the truth, be careful. Not everyone wants it unearthed." Marcus met her gaze, understanding the unspoken threat beneath the kindness. Trust was scarce, but he had Shadow's instincts to guide him. Together, they formed a silent partnership, man and dog against the shadows lurking in Maplewood. As evening fell, Marcus returned home, the leather pouch still heavy with promise and peril. He sat by the window, Shadow curled at his feet, the dog's steady breathing a balm to his restless thoughts. The town's quiet streets glowed under the street lamps, serene yet deceptive. Marcus's mind replayed the day's revelations. The wary glances, the hushed warnings, the layers of loyalty and fear woven into the fabric of Maplewood. He knew this was only the beginning. The peaceful facade was fragile, and beneath it lay a web of secrets that could shatter everything. But Marcus Kane was no stranger to darkness. His life had been shaped by discipline, loyalty, and a relentless pursuit of truth. And with Shadow's unwavering presence, he felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. Tonight, as the wind whispered through the maple leaves, Marcus made a silent vow to honor Jake's memory, to uncover the truth buried beneath years of silence, and to reclaim the brotherhood that death had tried to sever. The quiet town of Maplewood held its breath, unaware that a storm was gathering on its horizon, and that Marcus Kane, with Shadow at his side, was prepared to meet it head-on. The next morning, a pale mist clung to the tree-lined streets of Maplewood as Marcus Kane pulled on his jacket and clipped Shadow's leash with a quiet determination. The weight of the leather pouch in his pocket seemed heavier now, a tangible link to the mystery that had begun to unravel. Shadow's eyes were bright, alert to the subtle shifts in the town's rhythm, and Marcus felt the familiar surge of purpose that came with the promise of discovery. Their first stop was the local Veterans Hall, a weathered brick building tucked between the post office and a small hardware store. The faded sign above the door read, Maplewood Veterans Association. But the place was more than just a meeting spot. It was a repository of stories, wounds, and unspoken truths. Marcus had learned that in small towns like this, information often flowed through the bonds of shared experience rather than official channels. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old leather and worn wood. A handful of men and women, some in uniform and others in civilian clothes, gathered around tables cluttered with coffee cups and newspapers. Conversations paused as Marcus entered, Shadow at his side, but then resumed in low, cautious tones. Here he hoped to glean anything that might shed light on Jake Reynolds' last days. Marcus approached a man seated near the fireplace, a grizzled veteran with a scar, tracing the contour of his jaw and eyes that held a lifetime of stories. I'm looking for information about Jake Reynolds. He was a SEAL, part of my team. I need to understand what happened on that last mission. The man studied Marcus for a long moment before nodding slowly. Jake was a good man, but that mission, it left a bad taste in a lot of mouths. Not everyone wanted to talk about it, especially not after Jake started poking around. Poking around? Marcus asked, leaning in. The veteran's gaze flicked toward the others in the room and then back. Jake had suspicions about the mission's true purpose, about what was really going on. Said things didn't add up. He thought someone was covering up something big. Marcus's fingers tightened on Shadow's leash. The dog, sensing the tension, rested a reassuring head against Marcus's leg. Do you know who he suspected? The man shook his head. No names. Just whispers about betrayal, about men who put their own interests above the team. Jake didn't trust the brass, and that made him a lot of enemies. The conversation left Marcus with a knot in his stomach. Betrayal within their own ranks was a bitter pill to swallow, but it fit the puzzle pieces he had gathered so far. The cryptic note, the town's guarded silence, the wary eyes of neighbors. Leaving the veterans' hall, Marcus felt the weight of the town's unspoken fears pressing down on him. He and Shadow moved toward the outskirts of Maplewood, where the local shooting range offered another potential lead. Jake had been known to spend hours there, training and talking quietly with a few trusted friends. The range was quiet that morning, save for the distant echo of gunfire and the occasional murmur of voices. Marcus spotted a figure near the far end, a man in his late 40s with a weather-beaten face and a steady hand. As Marcus approached, the man lowered his rifle and nodded in recognition. "Marcus Kane," the man said, extending a hand. "Name's Tom Henderson. I knew Jake well." Marcus shook his hand firmly. "I'm trying to understand what happened on that mission. If Jake was onto something, I need to know." Tom's eyes darkened. Jake was different after that mission. Quiet, restless. He started asking questions no one wanted answered, especially about some of the intel we got, stuff that didn't add up. He thought they were sending us into a trap. Marcus listened closely as Tom described Jake's growing unease, his determination to find out the truth even as the walls closed in around him. He was digging deeper, talking to people he shouldn't have. That's when things got dangerous. Shadow stood alert, ears perked, as if sensing the gravity of Tom's words. Marcus felt a surge of protectiveness, not just for himself, but for the legacy of Jake and the truth that shadowed their past. Before leaving the range, Marcus asked, "Did Jake mention anyone specific? A name? A place?" Tom hesitated, then whispered, "There was talk about a contractor. Someone embedded with us who wasn't who he seemed. Jake didn't trust him. Said he had ties to people who shouldn't be involved." The revelation added another layer to the mystery. Marcus made a mental note to follow up on that lead, knowing that every detail brought him closer to the heart of the truth. As afternoon light began to filter through the maple trees, Marcus and Shadow made their way to the town's edge, where the local bar sat like a relic from another era. The worn sign creaked in the breeze, the Rusty Anchor. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and quiet conversations, the kind that held more meaning than the words themselves. Marcus spotted a few familiar faces, old friends of Jake's, men who had served alongside him or shared a drink in moments of respite. He approached a small group clustered near the jukebox, their laughter subdued but genuine. "I'm looking for anyone who knew Jake Reynolds," Marcus said, his voice low but firm, "especially about what happened after the mission." A man with a grizzled beard and sharp eyes nodded slowly. "Jake was chasing shadows. Said someone was playing us all, using the mission for something else. When he started asking questions, people got nervous." Another voice chimed in. He didn't trust Lieutenant Carlson. Said Carlson was too close to the contractors, too interested in covering up the real story. Marcus's pulse quickened. Lieutenant Carlson, a name that had surfaced in fragmented whispers, but never openly discussed. The pieces were coming together, but the danger was palpable. Shadow growled softly, sensing the tension in the room. Marcus placed a calming hand on the dog's head, then turned back to the group. "Did Jake ever find proof?" The men exchanged uneasy glances. "Not enough to make a move," the bearded man admitted, "but enough to make enemies." The bar's dim light cast long shadows across their faces, and Marcus knew the road ahead would be fraught with peril. Yet, the determination that had guided him through years of service now fueled his resolve to bring the truth to light. As dusk settled over Maplewood, Marcus and Shadow returned home, the weight of the day's discoveries settling around them. The town's serene exterior masked a web of secrets, loyalties, and betrayals that Marcus was only beginning to unravel. Sitting by the window, Marcus traced the edges of the leather pouch, now a symbol of the quest he could no longer abandon. Shadow rested at his feet, a silent guardian in the gathering dark. The questions multiplied, but so did the clues. And with every step, Marcus felt the bond with Jake strengthen, guiding him through the shadows toward the truth that lay hidden just beyond reach. The sun had barely risen when Marcus woke to the low rumble of Shadow's growl. His dog stood, rigid by the bedroom door, ears pricked, eyes fixed on the faint light filtering through the window. The unease was contagious, and Marcus knew it wasn't just the early hours stirring his senses. Something was wrong. Pulling on his jacket, he moved quietly, careful not to disturb the fragile calm that had settled over his home in Maplewood. Outside, the morning mist clung to the ground as he stepped into the yard, Shadow at his side, both alert to the subtle sounds of the waking town. The silence was unnerving, and the hairs on the back of Marcus's neck prickled with anticipation. He retraced his steps to the cemetery, the place where the mystery had first drawn him in. Shadow led the way, nose to the ground, sniffing with a fervor that spoke volumes. As they neared Jake Reynolds' grave, Marcus spotted a faint disturbance in the earth, a patch of soil that had been recently turned over. The leather pouch with the cryptic note had been just the beginning, but this new clue hinted at a deeper secret buried beneath the surface. Kneeling, Marcus brushed away the loose dirt, revealing the edge of a small metal box hidden just beneath. With careful hands, he unearthed it and pried it open. Inside lay a collection of files and photographs, their edges worn but contents intact. Among them was a faded photograph of Jake with a stern-looking man Marcus recognized from his SEAL days, a former teammate who had since moved into private contracting. As Marcus sifted through the documents, a chill ran through him. The files detailed covert operations, but several pages were redacted or marked classified. One sheet hinted at a betrayal, a mission compromised from within. The evidence painted a damning picture. Jake's death might not have been an accident or the result of enemy action, but the consequence of a deliberate cover-up. Shadow growled low, sensing the weight of the revelation. Marcus's mind raced as he pieced together the fragments. Jake had been onto something dangerous, something that threatened powerful interests. The warning in the note, "Trust no one," suddenly felt more urgent than ever. Determined to dig deeper, Marcus set out for the local police station, a modest building that sat inconspicuously on Main Street. The community's law enforcement had always been tight-knit, but whispers of corruption and leaks had circulated quietly, never fully addressed. Marcus needed answers, and he knew this was the place to start. Inside the station, the atmosphere was tense. Officers moved with purpose, eyes flickering toward Marcus and Shadow as they entered. Marcus approached the front desk, his voice steady but assertive. "I'm looking for Detective Laura Vance. I have information regarding Lieutenant Jake Reynolds and his final mission." The receptionist nodded, picking up the phone. Moments later, a tall woman with sharp features and an air of quiet authority appeared. Detective Vance's gaze was assessing, her handshake firm. "Marcus Kane, I've heard of you. What brings you here?" Marcus laid the metal box on her desk, watching as she flipped through the contents with practiced eyes. "Jake was my teammate. I believe his death was tied to a betrayal, and these files suggest there's more to the story than we've been told." Vance's expression hardened. "You're not the first to come looking for answers, but most end up leaving empty-handed, or worse." She glanced at the files again. "There's a leak in the department, someone feeding information to people who want to keep this quiet." Marcus nodded, the pieces falling into place. "I need to know who we can trust." Vance hesitated, then lowered her voice. I'm working undercover on this. We've been tracking a trafficking ring known as the Mountain Vipers. There's evidence that someone high up is involved. Shadow shifted beside Marcus, sensing the tension. The stakes were higher than Marcus had imagined. He looked Vance in the eye. I want to help, whatever it takes. A faint smile flickered across her face. Good, because this isn't just about Jake anymore. It's about cleaning up a mess that's been festering in Maplewood for years. Together, they pored over the files, cross-referencing names and dates with the ongoing investigation. Marcus's military background and Vance's law enforcement expertise complemented each other, forming a fragile alliance grounded in their shared desire for justice. As evening descended, Vance revealed a critical piece of intelligence. A shipment scheduled to pass through Maplewood, suspected to be linked to the Mountain Vipers. It was an opportunity, a chance to catch those responsible in the act. Marcus's jaw tightened. We need to set a trap. Vance nodded. But we have to be careful. If the leak gets wind of this, it could blow the entire operation. Back at his cabin, Marcus prepared for the coming confrontation. Shadow lay nearby, alert but calm. The dog's unwavering presence was a reminder of the loyalty and trust Marcus had been searching for, a stark contrast to the betrayals lurking in the shadows. As night fell over Maplewood, the calm facade of the town gave way to a simmering tension. Marcus and Vance coordinated with the DEA, assembling a team to monitor the shipment. Every detail was scrutinized, every movement calculated. In the quiet moments before the operation, Marcus stood by the window, the moonlight casting long shadows across the room. His thoughts drifted to Jake, to the brotherhood they had shared and the price paid for seeking the truth. Shadow nudged his hand, grounding him in the present. Together, they prepared to face the darkness that had claimed their past, determined to bring light to the secrets buried deep within Maplewood. The night was far from over, and the battle for justice was just beginning. The moon hung low over Maplewood as Marcus Kane, crouched behind a cluster of pine trees overlooking the narrow canyon road. The night was thick with tension, a cold wind rustling through the leaves and carrying the faint scent of pine and earth. Shadow sat silently beside him, muscles coiled like a spring, eyes sharp and alert. This was no ordinary night. It was the culmination of weeks of searching, questioning, and uncovering truths that had long been buried beneath the town's peaceful facade. The small team of DEA agents, led by Vance's brother Corbin, had taken strategic positions along the canyon's edge. Each man and woman was poised for action, their faces set with grim determination. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility as over him like a mantle. Every detail had to be perfect. Any misstep could mean disaster. In the distance, the dull hum of engines approached. Two trucks winding their way through the twisting canyon road, headlights piercing the darkness. The Mountain Vipers were coming. Marcus's heart pounded, a steady rhythm matching the beat of the mission that had become his purpose. Shadow's low growl was a reminder that danger was close and vigilance was paramount. As the trucks neared the trap, Vance's voice crackled quietly through the radio. Positions locked. Wait for my signal. Marcus nodded, though no one could see. He scanned the terrain, noting the rocky outcrops and dense underbrush that offered both cover and potential hazards. The men inside those trucks were armed and dangerous, and likely desperate. The first truck slowed as it reached the bottleneck Marcus and the team had prepared, a narrow bridge rigged with hidden sensors and cameras. The second truck followed closely behind, engines idling. The tension was palpable. Suddenly, headlights flickered, and a figure stepped into the beam. Vance's voice cut through the silence. Now. The coordinated strike erupted with precision, Flashbangs detonated, disorienting the Vipers as armed agents swarmed the vehicles. Gunfire shattered the night, echoing off the canyon walls in a deadly chorus. Marcus moved swiftly, adrenaline sharpening his senses. Shadow darted forward, barking commands only Marcus could interpret, his presence a beacon amidst the chaos. Marcus spotted movement, a woman being held against her will by a man in tactical gear. His heart seized. Vance was shouting orders, but the situation escalated fast. The man pressed the woman as a human shield, his eyes wild and desperate. Without hesitation, Shadow leapt into action, muscles rippling as he lunged at the attacker. The dog's jaws clamped onto the man's arm, forcing him to release the hostage. Marcus rushed forward, hand on his holster, ready to intervene if needed. The woman scrambled free, tears streaming down her face as she collapsed into Marcus's arms. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling with relief. The firefight intensified, bullets whizzing past as the Vipers fought back, fiercely. Marcus and the DEA team maintained their positions, gradually gaining the upper hand. One by one, the criminals were subdued, weapons dropped, and cuffs slapped around wrists. Amid the chaos, Marcus's eyes locked on Lieutenant Marcus Sterling, a man he had once respected, now revealed as the corrupt linchpin in the operation. Sterling's face twisted in rage and desperation as he was handcuffed and led away by agents. Shadow's bark cut through the noise, alerting Marcus to a small package hidden under the truck's chassis. Kneeling, Marcus retrieved a USB drive, the final piece of evidence linking Sterling to the Mountain Vipers' trafficking network. As the dust settled and the last of the Vipers were secured, Marcus felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. The mission was far from over, but tonight they had struck a decisive blow against the darkness that had plagued Maplewood. Vance approached, her face a mix of relief and determination. "We couldn't have done this without you, Marcus." He nodded, glancing down at Shadow, whose tail wagged weakly but proudly. "We're a team." Corbin stepped forward, clapping Marcus on the shoulder. "Your brother would be proud." The words struck a chord deep within Marcus. The memory of Jake Reynolds, his courage, his sacrifice, felt alive in that moment. The bond forged in battle had extended beyond death, guiding Marcus through the shadows toward justice. As dawn broke over the canyon, the town of Maplewood began to stir, unaware of the battle fought in its quiet outskirts. But for Marcus, Vance, Corbin, and Shadow, the victory was bittersweet, a reminder of the cost of truth and the price of loyalty. The journey was far from finished, but together, they had taken the first step toward healing a community scarred by betrayal. Marcus looked out over the canyon, the rising sun casting golden light on the rugged landscape. Shadow at his side, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The past had been confronted, the enemy exposed, and the path forward clearer than ever. They had forged a bond that could not be broken, by blood, by sacrifice, and by the unyielding pursuit of justice. Weeks had passed since the storming of the canyon, and Maplewood was beginning to breathe again. The town's streets, once heavy with suspicion and silence, now carried an undercurrent of cautious hope. Marcus Kane stood on a ridge overlooking the town, Shadow at his side, the early morning light casting long shadows across the valley below. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and fresh beginnings. The truth about Lieutenant Jake Reynolds had finally emerged from the shadows. The investigation, fueled by the evidence uncovered during the raid, had exonerated Jake, clearing his name from the whispers of betrayal and failure that had lingered for far too long. The community, once divided by fear and doubt, began to reclaim the honor owed to their fallen hero. Marcus's thoughts drifted to the weeks of relentless work. Interviews with veterans, late-night strategy sessions with Detective Laura Vance, and the unyielding support of the DEA team led by Corbin. Each piece of the puzzle had fallen into place, revealing a network of corruption that stretched deeper than anyone had imagined. Lieutenant Marcus Sterling's arrest had sent shockwaves through the town's police department, prompting a cleansing that was painful but necessary. Shadow nudged Marcus's hand gently, grounding him in the present. The dog's steady presence had been a constant through the turmoil, a reminder of loyalty, resilience, and the unspoken bond between man and companion. Together, they had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. In the days following the arrests, Detective Vance had been reinstated to her position, her dedication and courage recognized by the community she served. Her dream of establishing a wildlife rescue center, once a distant hope, began to take shape as local support rallied behind her vision. The project symbolized the healing that was possible when people came together with purpose and compassion. Marcus found himself drawn into the town's renewed spirit. The isolation he had felt since leaving the SEALs began to lift, replaced by a sense of belonging and camaraderie. The friendships forged through shared struggle became the foundation of a new chapter in his life, one defined not by battles fought in distant lands, but by the bonds nurtured at home. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over Maplewood, Marcus joined Vance and Corbin at the edge of the new Wildlife Center's grounds. Volunteers bustled about, setting up enclosures and tending to animals rescued from harm. The scene was alive with hope and determination. Vance smiled warmly at Marcus. "We couldn't have done this without you." He shook his head modestly. "You did the hard work. I just followed Shadow's lead." Corbin chuckled. Well, whatever the method, it worked. As they stood together, watching the sun set behind the mountains, Marcus felt a profound sense of peace. The journey that had begun with a dog's insistence at a grave had transformed into a mission of healing and justice. The scars left by betrayal were still there, but they were fading, replaced by resilience and unity. Shadow barked softly, drawing their attention to a young boy approaching with a curious gaze. The child held a small, handmade flag, its colors bright against the twilight. He looked up at Marcus and Vance, eyes wide with admiration. "Thank you for saving my dad," the boy said shyly. Marcus knelt, meeting the child's gaze. "We're just glad everyone is safe." The boy smiled, a beacon of innocence and hope. As he ran back toward the center, Marcus felt the full weight of their journey, the sacrifices made, the lives changed, and the future reclaimed. The bond between Marcus, Vance, Corbin, and Shadow had become unbreakable, forged in the fires of truth and tempered by shared purpose. Together, they had turned a town scarred by darkness into a community ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As night settled over Maplewood, the stars twinkled above, silent witnesses to the healing unfolding below. Marcus and Shadow stood side by side, their journey far from over, but their resolve stronger than ever. In the quiet that followed, the promise of hope echoed through the mountains, a testament to courage, loyalty, and the unyielding power of truth. The morning sun bathed the quiet cemetery in a soft golden light as Marcus Kane stood once more before Lieutenant Jake Reynolds' grave. The maple leaves rustled gently in the breeze, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the somber stone that bore his brother-in-arms' name. Shadow sat faithfully at Marcus's side, his dark eyes reflecting a calm that had eluded both men for so long. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out the weathered leather pouch, the very one that had set their journey in motion weeks ago. He ran his fingers over its worn surface, a symbol of loyalty, sacrifice, and the unyielding bond between man and dog. The town of Maplewood lay spread out below, peaceful in a way it hadn't been for years. For Marcus, this was more than a visit. It was a moment of reflection on the journey that had transformed his life. The search for truth had brought him back from the shadows of grief and isolation, forging new connections and healing old wounds. The community had rallied around Jake's memory, and in doing so, had begun to heal itself. Shadow nudged Marcus's hand, a reminder of the steadfast companionship that had guided him through the darkest nights. Together, they had uncovered betrayal, faced danger, and found justice. Not just for Jake, but for the town itself. As Marcus looked out over the rolling hills and quiet streets, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. The bonds forged in battle had extended beyond the battlefield, creating a family of friends who stood united against adversity. Detective Laura Vance's dedication had restored faith in the law, while Corbin's unyielding support had strengthened their resolve. And through it all, Shadow had been the constant, the silent guardian. Marcus knelt and placed the leather pouch gently on the grave, a final tribute to the brother who had never truly left his side. "Rest easy, Jake," he whispered. "We've carried your truth forward." The wind stirred the leaves, carrying with it the echoes of sacrifice and courage. Marcus rose and stood with Shadow, their shadows stretching long across the earth, intertwined and unbroken. Before leaving, Marcus took a moment to look back at the town, feeling the weight of history and hope mingling in the crisp air. The story they had lived was one of loyalty and sacrifice, but also one of redemption and renewal. As they walked away from the grave, Marcus's thoughts turned outward, to the countless others who serve silently, whose stories go untold. He carried with him a conviction to honor their sacrifices and to share the message of courage and devotion he had witnessed firsthand. In the distance, the sun climbed higher, illuminating the path ahead. Marcus and Shadow moved forward together, their bond unshaken, their mission clear. The quiet town of Maplewood had found its light once more, and with it, a reminder that even in the darkest places, heroes emerge. In the steadfast loyalty of a dog, the unwavering courage of a man, and the enduring strength of a community united. Their journey was a testament to the power of truth, the resilience of the human spirit, and the unbreakable ties that bind us all. With one last glance at the grave, Marcus and Shadow disappeared down the path, stepping into a future shaped by hope, honor, and the enduring legacy of those who serve.